So back in the 90s, I was watching the Discovery Channel. This was back when they still took documentaries a little more seriously, in my opinion. And I could watch them for days on end. I love documentaries anyway, so a channel that showed nothing but them I thought was absolutely brilliant. And I come in one day and there's this documentary on, and I assume it's a joke. I wasn't there for the beginning, so I wasn't sure. I thought maybe the Discovery Channel had just made this up to challenge our ideas of the universe, but it appeared to be trying to argue that the world in fact was flat, not spherical. And it was great. They had these experts coming on trying to make these arguments for why the world was flat instead of round. They had this one guy that I thought made a really interesting point. He said, if indeed the world is a sphere instead of being flat, then buildings should be wider at the top than at the bottom. Why? Because when people make, or what people used to do when they made buildings before we had wonderful little things like lasers, they would use plumb tools, which were weights on the end of a string. And you'd go up to the top of the building and you'd dangle it over the side. And that's how you would tell if your wall was straight or not. And of course, if indeed the world was spherical and the center of gravity was in the middle instead of just straight down the way it would be if we were on a plate, then the plumb tool would actually be pointing this way at an angle. And of course, buildings would wind up being wider at the top than at the bottom. And that's a great argument. Now, if you think about it for more than a couple of seconds, you realize, well, buildings probably are wider at the top than at the bottom. It's probably such an infinitesimally small measurement that we can't even calculate it. It's probably a few atoms wider or a few microns wider, I don't know, but the world is so huge that that variance is going to be extremely minuscule. But whatever the case, it was great to think about. I got to the end of the documentary, and apparently it wasn't a joke. It was put out by a group called the Flat Earth Society, and these are people who really believe the Earth is flat instead of round. And the very first thought I had was, wow, they need to put this in schools. They need to have every child watch this documentary. Why? Because I think the Earth is flat? No, of course not. Because I think it's incredibly important to challenge every concept, especially the concepts that we take to be utterly and completely true, that we take completely for granted. Human evolution doesn't just come because we build on previous knowledge, because previous knowledge often is incorrect, or parts of it are incorrect. And so the way we really evolve is through questioning those things and coming up with the next idea and the next idea and the next idea. Because as we move further in scientific theory, even though we start learning more and more of what can be done, we also get these ideas about what can't be done. And so questioning is very, very important. Otherwise, we, well, wouldn't even have what we have today. This is why I think it's extremely good to do this sort of thing not only to yourself, but to kids. It really annoys me how little faith people have in children. I've recently been reading things on how people freak out over evolution being taught in schools, or freak out over creationism being taught in schools. Oh my goodness, you're going to confuse children. You're not going to confuse children. Children are not as stupid as you think they are. They will take certain things verbatim when they're very young. So what? The wonderful thing about kids is that they get into their teens and then they rebel and they start questioning everything. It's just the way our brains work. And it's a very, very important part in our revolution, is to question everything that we've ever been taught. It is part of how we evolve as people. It's part of how we evolve as a society. And you know what? The Earth may not be round. We may one day find that, in fact, we really live on a long stream of particles that run crisscrossing through an infinite number of wormholes to create what feels to be a three-dimensional space. Or we may find out that the whole holographic universe concept is true, and that in reality we're a three-dimensional surface imprinted on a two-dimensional surface. And so in reality we are flat. Who knows? Who knows? The point is, questioning is incredibly important. And when, even for yourself, even for all of you watching, keeping an open mind isn't important just because you're keeping an open mind. It's important because this is genuinely how we evolve. We often learn much more about what we believe about the world around us through being questioned than we do just by thinking more and more on what we believe and thinking in a line. So, that's about all I've got to say about the Flat Earth Society. I'm the Urban Omnist who, as far as I know, is still living on a spherical Earth. Or so I hope. And guys, please don't forget to support us as much as possible by clicking subscribe, liking us on Facebook and Twitter, and please, 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 please send me those questions right at this address. Thank you very much. Again, I'm the Urban Omnist.